What is resilience? What does it mean to you? Is it about happiness, toughness, quick recovery, the ability to spring back from setbacks? All of these things, or something else entirely? What does a resilient team look like, and how can you build one as a leader? Well, we've been exploring these questions and more this month on Leading with Integrity in our mini-series about resilience. And in the previous 4 episodes over the course of this month, we have heard from recognised experts on the subject, business owners who have faced challenging times, and we've learned about resilience from these varying perspectives. So in this special bonus episode, we're going to look back at some of those insights, as well as draw in a few more from some recently recorded but as yet unpublished episodes. So it's a slightly new format. It's a shorter form episode than usual, and we're publishing it on a Sunday because why not? Let me know what you think. Pop a review, leave a comment if you can, depends where you're watching it, but all feedback appreciated, and I hope you find this episode useful.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Welcome back, listener and viewer. Today, in this bonus episode, we are summing up our month-long mini-series on resilience. There's a well-known song, possibly from the 90s, can't remember exactly when, showing my age there possibly, but it had the lyric about getting knocked down but getting back up again and never being kept down. And that's the way most people would probably describe resilience if you put them on the spot about it. But as we've seen over the last 4 episodes or so, it can be a more nuanced, complex and individual concept than that quite simplistic view of it. Much like many other misunderstood buzzwords and phrases, and even like leadership itself. So the question we've been seeking to answer, among others, is what is resilience? What does it mean to people, to teams, to companies? To answer that with us, first up, we had Julian Roberts and his thoughts on resilience as a way of dealing with uncertainty, failure, and change from his expertise on building resilient teams. So here's the clip of his answer from the episode right at the beginning of this month.
There's a lot of resilience banded about, and I think, COVID probably even more so, about being resilient. And we all have a different view on life and a different view on the world. And, I look at it from a perspective of we all face uncertainty. And I think that's quite an obvious thing to say to people, but it is to get the reality. We all have failure in our businesses, our organizations, and we also have a lot of change. Change is just consistent, seems to be at the moment in every shape and walk of life. So for me, resilience is about how you navigate those uncertainties, failures and change. And it's, uncertainty is putting in things in place that will help you keep you anchored in that moment. And I talk a lot about being anchored in a purpose, whether that's personally or from an organization point of view. Because despite the uncertainty, you can be certain of your purpose and where that goes, and it anchors you and anchors a team, anchors an organization. So that's one aspect of it all. The failure side for me is, and it sounds very cliche, is that viewing failure or reframing failure as feedback. And almost an opportunity to learn. And I think for me, resilience is that important thing about what did you learn from that moment when you got knocked down, things didn't go quite as expected. What's the learning in it? And we live in such fast pace. We don't spend enough time reflecting and pausing and learning to see what next really. And a learning individual or learning team is for me what drives resilience in that sense. And then the whole sense of change, how you deal with change and the emotional side of things that come with that, because there's a lot of emotions around that. So that for me is what I would say. Resilience is that ability to learn, get back up and navigate it. Yes, there's elements of grit, determination, but I think that for me can become a bit toxic. And I think we've got to be careful of almost what I call the toxic resilience, where, you just got to keep going and keep pushing through and work long hours and, don't worry about the boundaries of life, of work and personal life, and suppress all your emotions and what. I think that to me is toxic. I think you've got to be aware of all that and be careful, because otherwise you end up at this point of burnout, and nobody's good in a context of burnout. So yeah, that's my view on it anyway.
Then in that second episode of the series, we heard from design leader and disability advocate Catherine Hicks on her views of resilience from both a leadership perspective and the experience of living with chronic illness.
Living with chronic illness and disability pretty much since birth, I have a very probably unique vantage point in that. And personally, it's just getting up and doing things when you don't want to. Getting up when things are hard and difficult. And then also resilience for me, and this may not be for everyone, is also realizing when it's okay to take a break. Resilient, you have to recharge to be able to be resilient. And that's probably the biggest thing I've learned as both someone who lived experience as a disabled person and a business owner and a graduate school student. That's been the last year and a half. On top of that, it's a lot on the plate. And sometimes resilience is knowing when you need to retreat for your mental health, for your physical health, for your sanity, for the other people around you, so you don't lose your absolute ever loving mind at them. Sometimes resilience is understanding that no is okay, right? We put in the society, and I think I don't know if this is just an American thing or if this is more a global thing. I really do think this is very tied into American exceptionalism, that we tie our worth to how much we work and how hard we work and how high we climb the corporate ladder. And I haven't taken a vacation in 6 years. That kind of mentality is very prominent here. And I think that doesn't lead to resiliency. That leads to burnout. So resiliency to me also has the idea of taking time for yourself, taking time for your family, taking time for the things that matter is part of resiliency to me, because there are days I'm recording this in my bed in my PJs right now because the last week has been hard physically and I haven't been working. And knowing that I don't have to push through everything is going to allow me to push through when I need to. That day I have a deadline and my body is not cooperating and I'm in pain. I can do that, but I also know when not to do that. And resilience as a leader is knowing that you're going to fail. Just knowing you're going to fail. You're going to screw something up. You're going to hurt somebody's feelings. You're going to be way more aggressive than you intend to. You're going to miss the mark with a policy. There's going to be something you're going to do that is going to be wrong as a leader. And resilience is being humble enough to take the time to learn from those things, right? It's not about fall down 7, get up 8 times. That's only a small part of what resilience is. You have to have the right mindset to go into it. And if you go into it going, everything that happens is a potential for learning, you're going to be more resilient, right? And so for me, it's kind of all those things combined, especially as a leader. I really just look at modeling what I feel being a good human is. For example, I'm very much about take a day. You don't have to tell me why, those kinds of things, because I don't want my team. You have resilience and you have burnout, and they're two sides of the same coin. It's just how you kind of deal with the energy levels and what needs to be done. Sometimes we need to push through. Sometimes we need to just fall down 7 and get up 8. But I think resilience is far more nuanced than that.
Third up, we had a slightly more contextual view, if you like, from Andrew Ronchetto, a holistic wellness technology founder.
For me, I think there's a few elements to it, and it depends who we're talking about resiliency with. So if I'm talking to you, David, as an individual, what it means to have resiliency in your life, I think it's about the ability for you to have balance and harmony across everything that's going on and everything you're trying to do that, I'll say helps you get up in the morning, the why factor of your life and how you get after that. So it's sometimes our resiliency on a personal level is impacted. We had a bad day. And that's where I think one of the most important things we've kind of also been circling the drain on a little bit, but haven't said is connection with other individuals. And in that case, for an individual, it be family, it be friends, but also in the workplace, it can be colleagues and whatnot. But connection and relationships are sometimes just that little bit of what's needed to help us get us out of that rut. And so resiliency for me is really an understanding and appreciating, creating balance and harmony within life to go after the things that are most important, bring you back to your why, the things that give you energy, the things that make all your actions meaningful, the things that help you be your authentic self and make decisions more quickly. It really is, resiliency is about bringing that forward. And an enterprise and an organization, resiliency for me is an extension of that. It's almost a magnification aspect of it, in the sense that whether, we're going to experience these ups and downs like we've been talking about over the course of the episode. How do I make it feel less like a roller coaster and more just like the kiddie ride? And for me, that is what I would say is the way to look at resiliency within the organization, because it doesn't mean we're not going to have these ups and downs as an organization, but the things we do to build resiliency into our teams, like the clarity we can have in our roles and responsibilities. And it's amazing. You can have the conversation to say, here's what I was hired for. Here's what my manager told me to do. And here's what I'm actually doing. And the three things don't connect with each other. It's very hard to build resiliency in that just one example, because you're stressed out about all the things that were said, and not everybody's with you day to day. So if an executive comes in and says, well, this is your job to be doing, you're like, yeah, but everybody's got me doing something else. I mean, there's stress in there. It's not healthy. But the flip side of that, or, another example of that is in, sustainable operations from a people perspective. Resiliency in that, your operations is about creating support mechanisms for teams, for individuals when they need additional flex. We kind of put our rigid boxes around every department and say that, stay in your lane, so to say. But the ability for the entire organization to understand and move as one is a key element of resiliency.
And then on Wednesday, earlier this week, creativity and innovation expert Jodie Newman shared her views on resilience from the perspective of business and creative thinking.
You didn't ask me to sum it up in one word, and I don't wish to be reductive about it, but I ended up with the notion of flexibility. I think for me, that is really, if you have flexibility in your mindset, in your approach, which for me is, the ultimate ally of creative thinking, then you have inbuilt resilience. I think where business owners butt up against something and fail is it's not gone to plan, which 9 times out of 10 it doesn't, and yet so it doesn't match your plan. But your plan is written down. So you're just going to keep rinse and repeating until something changes. And often the only thing that will change that dynamic is you. And if you can't be flexible enough to change, it's not going to end well. So I think for me, it has to come down to flexibility. It is challenging. I think there is something about, you can retain the ultimate purpose, the ultimate mission, but the path to get there may well change. And I think it may be because you see an opportunity and build a slightly different path, or it could be, and as I said, right at the start, having done this for sort of 24 years, I've seen most things. So my path has changed numerous times because of small things like a financial crash, which took a 6-figure business to pretty much nothing over the course of about 2 months. So, regardless of whether I wanted to stay on the path I was on, and I could have probably happily stayed doing what I was doing pre-financial crash of sort of 2008-9 for the next couple of decades, quite happily, the market thought differently. my client, my sales pipeline, because I was doing ID generation, I was paid out of either a marketing budget, biz dev budget, or R&D. They were the first buckets of cash to shut. And so my clients, we still want to use you, but we cannot pay you. So, and without the flexibility to go, oh, okay, now I'm here. I didn't design to be here. Let's face it, I don't want to be here, but I'm here nonetheless. So there are always choices and there are always options. And it's having the flexibility to go, okay, so what do I keep hold of? And what do I change? And if you have that options thinking, so if you have the flexibility to think divergently, like, here's a challenge, let me think of 20, 30, 100 ways I could solve this, and then make a decision about which idea is going to serve me and my business best. If you can do that and have that flexibility of thinking, you can navigate your way through. If you've got the one idea and you're clinging to it like a life raft, and that life raft is deflating before your eyes, there's only one way you're going to go, and that's down, submerged.
Indeed. Yes. Up the proverbial creek.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
And as an added extra, I've asked the same question of 3 more podcast guests who we've recorded with recently. They will be appearing each in their own full-length episodes, not about resilience specifically, in the coming months. So something of a sneak preview in this episode today as well. First of those was the Mind Locksmith, mental health coach Matt Sturgis, who had a lovely turn of phrase on the subject about bounceability, but I've probably just spoiled it for you. But anyway, here's the clip from his episode.
A lot of resilience training focuses on things like reframing things, which can work and can be useful, but mainly works when you're in a good place and your rational brain can take control. The issue is when something triggers, fear system kicks off, your rational brain has gone missing in action, because the irrational part, which is physically at the back of the head, is faster, much faster, and hijacks you and takes over with habits that it's got. Might be good habits, might be bad habits, but it basically says, right, this has happened, right, this is fear, right, we've recognised, and therefore habit X is appropriate. Off we go, let's deploy habit X, which could be anything, but normally isn't something useful, because of most of our habits we've picked up before the age of 7. So, for example, silly one, but I find it quite amusing anyways. Quite rightly, in most cultures, we're told don't speak to strangers. Perfectly good advice when you're growing up. You're an adult and you've got a sales job.
Yeah.
So that's why, that literally is why, for some people, depending on what their experience was growing up, having that conversation, and also fear of rejection. Again, a huge human thing is to please the people that are bringing you up, to make sure they feed you. It's just a basic biological thing. So then you get a rejection in a sales job, and it's like, oh my God, I feel awful. It's like, well, actually, they just said no, and actually that means you can find the next person. So that there's all sorts of those triggers. So a lot of my work is about helping people change those habits to things that they choose to have. So I got a framework I call ACE. So A is awareness. So I explain what is actually happening and some particular habits that we all tend to have. C is about choosing a different response and a different habit, and they're easy to do. And E is embedding it as your new habit. So you've now basically willingly reprogrammed your brain so that when this happens, I'm now going to respond in this way. So I rather strange. So I came up with an idea. One aspect, there's lots of ways I do this, but one aspect will be one of my next books, is 7 ways of thinking that trip you up and how to untangle yourself. So I came up with 7 common ways that often cause sort of discomfort in thinking. I ended up, ironically, using that myself. About 7 years ago, my wife went through a really difficult year of cancer treatment. She's fine now. So I actually ended up road testing my own techniques. And I was a first-class worrier before that. Bloody brilliant at it, which made me an excellent project manager because I could predict everything that would go wrong and put something in place before it ever did, but not good in life in general. But changing your response to it to get back to things like, what are the pure facts of this? It takes a bit of doing, but it's things like that sort of help people with. But yeah, I sort of slightly answered your question. Yeah, so I refer to resilience as bounceability.
Yeah.
So I've got a little diagram somewhere where I sort of show someone just sort of about to fall off of something, and then a set of cushions that they fall onto. So my definition of it is how deep are those cushions so that they don't fall too far before they bounce back up again. And then that's about the habits that you build in your mind so that when your mind does trip off into sort of fight, flight and the old habits, it knows how to recover quite quickly because you've now effectively programmed it in a way that you want. But it's it sounds complicated, but it's not. It's and you can do that quite easily. More, and it doesn't mean hypnosis or anything like that. Because part of our brain weirdly responds the same way to real or imagined events. Which seems odd, but think about a film that you've watched. You're sat there watching a film. I don't do horror, but let's say it's horror and someone's being chased and your heart's racing. You're thinking, hang on, I'm watching a film. Why is my heart racing? I don't get what. Or, I don't know, it's an emotional thing, really sort of tearful, and you get a bit tearful in your eyes. You're thinking, well, it's a film. It's like, what's going on here? The same way when you're asleep, because your unconscious mind is fully awake, your conscious mind is asleep. You have nightmares. And when you wake up, you think, oh, thank God, I'm all right. But that was just a dream. It wasn't reality, but your heart's racing. So that part of the brain behaves the same way. Sometimes it's referred to as fear is fake emotion appearing real.
And then your startup partner, Lee Lamb, offered a well-considered definition that perhaps aligns quite well with that song lyric that I referenced at the beginning of this episode.
I have to say I talk about resilience a lot recently, certainly in the last couple of years. When I think of resilience, I think of relentlessness, right? So resilience isn't about having the answer to everything. It's knowing that it's going to keep coming at you, right? If you make a sale today, that's great. You still have to make one tomorrow. If you spend money today, you're still going to have to spend money tomorrow. We talk about business being this infinite game, but I don't think people truly understand what that means. Making the sale isn't like a happy ever after. You just have to go and do it all again the next day and the next day and the next day. And the resilience is understanding what resources you have personally to keep that relentlessness going. And you see a lot of people get very tired. They run their business for 4 or 5 years, full steam. They're going at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and they talk about burnout, and it's an absolute real thing. But it's not because the job gets too difficult for them. It's just the relentlessness. It eventually wears you down, and resilience is like the counterbalance to that. That's the way I think of it anyway.
I like that. Yeah, that's a good way to think of it. Yeah, I kind of see it. Yeah, it's a great defense against burnout, isn't it? But then I also think, to a point, it doesn't really matter how resilient you are. If you keep doing the stressful, unpleasant thing for long enough, you will burn out eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I feel like that's maybe a narrative that isn't out there as much as it should be, because people talk about, if you're a little bit resilient, that's fine, then you won't burn out. Job done. I don't think it's that simple.
No, resilience is, to me, always about being able to check your toolkit and recognize when you're running out of things, and that's what we don't do, and that's why we get burnout. There's this idea that if you can weather one storm, you can weather every storm. Well, you can, but you've run out of a few things. And if you don't spend time to go, oh, I actually need more of that. So, particularly with smaller companies, cash flow is a constant source of, despair most of the time, right? You're kind of on paper, you're making money, but it sure doesn't feel like it because everything is, timed precisely. Resilience will help you get through the sudden surprise. Oh crap, I've got to come up with that cash from somewhere and pulling on your resources. But resilience also says, how can you make sure it's not a surprise the next time? Right? It's not about the ability to get through difficult times. It's about getting through the difficult time and getting better at dealing with it the next time. And I think that's the bit that I would completely agree. It just doesn't get talked about. It's like if you've solved the problem once, you will solve it the same each time. No, you won't, because next time your resources might be different. You may not have put in place the things that could give you an early warning system, because that's all we're talking about. Just making sure that you're always prepared for what comes along. And each time something comes along, it gives you more examples of, oh, okay, I've got to be prepared for that happening as well. Okay, cool. And, staying on top of everything.
And finally, ending on a more profound note, when I discussed the concept of resilience with Eddie Smits, he had a heartfelt, genuinely powerful answer. And to put this next clip in the right context, Eddie had spent over a decade working as a hospital clown with sick children.
Also a very difficult question. I saw children of 3 years with more resilience than grown-ups, right? So I've seen these things, that children that are 3 or 4 years old with a few days to live, that have more common sense than their parents or whoever. Here it all comes down to the same. Resilience is something you choose for. You choose to be resilient, right? As you choose to not eat the cake because it will make you fat, or not drink 10 beers because you know it will make you drunk. We know all these things, and we have a choice. And there's nothing wrong with making a wrong choice, because the next day you can make another choice. That's also what I say to people. Don't be afraid to make the wrong choice. Day after it, you make another choice. You're not a donkey, right? He doesn't change his opinion. But you're a human being. You can change your opinion the whole time. You can change your course, what you choose the whole time. So resilience is also a choice. You can be the victim, or you can say, no, I don't want to be the victim. I want to be something else. I've seen parents that lost their. I think for me, as a parent, I think the worst thing that can happen to you is to see your child die. I think that's the worst thing that can happen to you. I can be wrong, but okay. And I've seen parents that, which children they died from disease, their life was over, right? They had nothing to live for. And actually they died that day too, right? And then I saw other parents. Of course, they grieved, and it stays terrible, but they made something out of it. One of the parents, she organized a kind of, I don't know how to call it, but where people that lose their child can go to talk, to get help, etc. So she started that organization, right? So she made something out of that terrible grief, out of that terrible loss, but she made something out of it. And some people just keep looking in the past and keep digging there. But yeah, the thing about the past is you can't change anything there, right? Actually, you can also only change something now. That's all you can do. So for me, resilience is a choice that people make or take. And if you can't take it yourself, there's always people that can help you or people love to help people. I truly believe that. I really truly believe that they like to help people. So there's always something willing to help you, always. But you have to ask. You have to ask. If you're standing in the road and you look around and nobody's stopping to ask, oh, what's your problem? Then maybe you will stand there for an hour. But if somebody walks by and say, hey, I'm looking for this shop or this thing, they will say, oh yeah, it's there and there and there. Or in the worst case scenario, they say, oh, sorry, I don't know where it is. And you ask the next one, right? It's also simple, David, but yeah.
So thank you to all of our excellent guests this month and beyond. Some unique, varying takes on resilience there to hopefully stimulate your thought processes on the subject too, and a collection as well of great advice and tactics on building resilient teams, resilience in yourself, and coping with those inevitable situations that test it. I will include links to the full episodes from the mini-series in the show notes below, so do catch up with them if you've not heard them yet, and keep your eyes and notifications peeled for the upcoming full episodes with Lee, Eddie, and Matt. Thank you for listening. I hope I've not imposed upon your Sunday afternoon too much. If you would like to learn more about leading with integrity, gain access to some of my courses, events, and more leadership resources, as well as early access to these podcast episodes, then do click the other link in those show notes below, or visit www.leadingwithintegrity.co.uk and hit that green button to come and join us at Integrity Leaders today. Community, support, and resources for new leaders, first-time founders, and managers who want to learn about leadership. There's also a 50% off discount code exclusive to podcast listeners. You will find that in the show notes too. That's all for today's extra bonus super special episode. I'll see you again on Wednesday for my upcoming chat with Podmatch founder Alex Sanfilippo. So until then, enjoy the rest of your weekend and be a leader, not a boss.